Hi everyone, this is Kaitlyn with Exist Vibrantly Art. I'm the Chief Creative Director of this company, and I have a degree in social work, and I've also taught art classes for adults and children throughout the Denver area. I have experience mentoring youth in other states as well as Colorado, and so I feel comfortable sharing this information with you. Today I'm going to be talking about how to draw a mandala from a blank piece of paper. I wanted to show you guys a finished sample. This is an ink and metallic Sharpie and graphite piece. The one that you create is going to be completely different, so just understand that my process is completely unique from your personal process, and just this is an example and a guide of one way that I am able to personally create a mandala, which is an example is this beautiful shape here. Let's see. So for this, you'll need just a blank piece of paper and just a number 2 pencil. I also grabbed some other supplies that I personally am going to use, but the basic things are just a blank piece of paper and a number 2 pencil. I personally am also going to use, I have a piece of cardstock here that I like to put on my surface that I draw on, that way it doesn't smudge the back of whatever the page in my sketchbook is that's facing the surface I'm drawing on. And then I also like to take a second, remember this is just my process as an artist and an art teacher, I like to take a second scrap cardstock and put it underneath that paper. Personally, I like to take masking tape and put a small piece under each corner of the bottom of the paper. That way my page doesn't personally move as I'm creating. I found throughout my process that I kind of get frustrated when my page moves, and so this is a preventative way to prevent that page movement and also kind of help ensure clean lines. It's not a perfect system, you know, do your best, right, with everything in life. So I am the Chief Creative Director of the company Exist Vibrantly Art, but I am representing Spectra Art Space. I've shown there for a few years now, and I wanted to share how to draw a mandala with you guys. So like I said, I've got the number 2 pencil is my basic tool. Once I've got my page all set up, I'm going to share with you guys some of the other tools. Now I've got a ruler, just basic, 12-inch ruler, pencil sharpener, very important. I've got a gum eraser, or art gum is what this is called. This is honestly my favorite eraser to personally use. I've got a bunch in my collection, but this is the one that I always personally gravitate towards. I find it actually picks up the graphite marks a little bit easier than like the one that's on the back of a basic number 2 pencil. Sometimes they can get a little bit hard, and so one other trick as well is to take the big pink pearl ones and to rip it in half. I found that it's helpful if you have that kind of marked center to get those clean lines. But today I'm going to use this art gum eraser. I also wanted to share some other basic supplies that many of you guys probably have at home right now. I've got a number 2 pencil, but it's just a mechanical version. It allows for some cleaner lines, and you don't have to sharpen quite as often, but it, same purpose as this thing. I've got, I believe Sharpies are alcohol-based ink. So I've got a Sharpie, and another thing to keep in mind is when you're using Sharpies is to make sure that you have that cardstock underneath. I've also got a couple water-based markers. So I've got 2 skinny Crayolas. Pretty much most people that have kids have maybe a pack of Crayola markers or crayons in their house somewhere. So maybe if you're a parent and you have kids there, then you can just borrow their art supplies. If you're an adult and you want to use some water-based markers, or maybe if you're a kid and you want to use some water-based markers that aren't Crayola, some of my favorite are these Tombow brush pens. Keep in mind that they are water-based, so if you, for example, actually I'm going to take my bracelet off right now. I usually wear this bracelet that is cotton, and when I wash my hands, sometimes it gets wet, and I've smeared my artwork with this, so I'm going to give you guys a little word of wisdom, and I'm going to do that preventative action right now. But anyway, so basically the moral of that story was that you can smear water-based ink, and so be careful, because learn from my mistake, basically. I've also got 3 highlighters. I really like to layer the Sharpie highlighters with other mediums. I think it adds a dimension of, I don't know, highlight, I guess, or unpredictability to the piece, and most people have Sharpies or Sharpie highlighters in their collection. So that is a couple of the different things I'm going to be using today. Personally, I also have my water base, alcohol base, and graphite collection here, so I might be pulling from them, but this is the basic supplies. For the mandala shape, generally I find it's easy, I've got something on my plate. Generally I find it's easier to have a circle shape that you're working from, because drawing a perfect circle can kind of be you know, it's a lot. It's hard. You know, art can be hard. So I have 3 different circle shapes to choose from. I'm personally just using a bowl, dinner plate, and a couple different size plates here. And I have a drawing only brush. I did clean it a little bit recently, so I've been using it again. Anyway, so this is a brush that's for drawing only. Other than when I clean this does not get wet. But what this is when I sketch with graphite and then take my art gum eraser and go over it, or take my art gum eraser and erase after I layer my ink on, I can go over with this and brush away any scraps of the eraser that's left behind without smearing my artwork, because the oils on your hands and the water on your hands, the sweat on your hands, the salt, all sorts of that kind of thing can mess up your artwork. And so learned that the hard way personally, so again, learn from my mistake. Before I get started, I also wanted to share with you guys some books that have really inspired this class and that I'm going to refer to a little bit. The first one is Zentangle Basics. I think I got this at Barnes & Noble a few years ago. There's this page in here where they talk about how you can create basic line shapes and give you a step-by-step for that. So generally when I work on mandalas, I like to keep this open or something similar open. I've also got Mandala for the Inspired Artist, and the reason I wanted to share this is because mandalas examples. So this is an example of one that's themed by nature. Once again, this is not my artwork. This is from this Mandala for the Inspired Artist book, which I'm borrowing as well from someone else. It's not my book even. I've also got this basic shape one that I wanted to share with you guys as well. So this mandala specifically is made with paper craft, but I wanted you guys to see the shape of the circle in the center. Most mandalas start with that circle shape and then use repeated patterns around in a number that is symbolic for the creator, whatever number that means for you. Sometimes I personally create in sections of 4, sometimes I create asymmetrically, which means it doesn't match at all. Sometimes I personally create sections of 6 or sections of 8. Sometimes I overlap circles, so there's really no wrong way to do this. If you are creating and it sort of has some sort of circle, sacred, geometric shape that means something intuitively to you, then you are successfully doing this style of art. But I just wanted to share this with you because it has the circle in the center. This book as well is very inspiring, and this is by Judith Cornell, PhD, all about mandalas, and the reason I wanted to share it because of this piece in here. Now, to me, this piece illustrates how one work of art can bring together many themes in many different cultures. This is a very complex mandala, and artists throughout time have used this style of art creation to connect with their own individual energy, but then also with their own individual intention and whatever inspires them. This also I don't know how I want to phrase this. This is a way that individuals are able to connect with their creative energy. And I'll just leave it at that. So, for my piece, I'm going to find the center of my page by measuring. So I know that my sketchbook is about 12 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and do a mark at the bottom of my page at the 6-inch mark. And then I'm going to do a top mark at about the 6-inch mark. Again, just a basic number 2 pencil. Just gonna, oh, I also personally move my paper around. It allows me to have a more symmetrical finished product. Everyone's process is different. I think that you personally should do what you feel is best for you when you are creating your mandala. I'm just sharing you what works for me as an artist and an art teacher. So now I have found the center of my paper. I'm going to go ahead and measure. Should have left it turned the other way. I'm going to go ahead and measure the halfway points. So this sketchbook is honestly just under 9. So I'm going to go ahead and mark at 4.5. And I'm just going to know that my piece is going to be a little bit off center, and I'm going to be okay with that because I've got to remember that nothing in life is perfect. And that is one of the first lessons that I learned in art school take 1, which was logo design, is that nothing's perfect because it's created by humans and humans are imperfect. Alright, so I found my center point on my page with that number 2 pencil. Once again, I'm using number 2 because it's really light and it will be easy to erase when I go ahead and add that ink layer. So now I've got a couple different circle shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and find, remember it's not perfect. So it's the center, approximate point. Hold down the center and trace my circle. And I've got my second circle shape, and since my center of my X is the center of the page, I've just got to do my best to center my circle. If I was going to sell this piece, I would likely measure it and make sure that everything was really precise. However, I'm personally not that critical of a person, so since this is a personal piece and I'm using it to teach a class, I'm not going to worry about measuring it. However, I did want to just offer you guys another option because there is, maybe a little bit more way to be precise with it. I personally find the imperfections in art to be beautiful, so I don't want my art to be super perfect. I just wanted it to be kind of centered a little bit. Which it is, it's kind of centered a little bit, but it's also off center. Then I'm going to take my last dinner plate and trace that last circle. Now I want you guys to understand that this line is going to go off the page, and this cultivates something in artwork called a leading line. Now leading lines can be something that are straight, they could be curved, they can be whatever shape, but what it means is it's a line that implies a sense of continuity off of the artwork. So I'm creating the illusion for you guys that this continues off the page even though the physical actual created piece is really only what you can see. But your mind knows that there should actually be a circle there. So in your mind's eye, in theory, based on what I've learned throughout my social work degree, you would want to follow this line and create that circle shape even though it's not there and connect it back to this line that's there. So now I've got my base lines here. I'm going to go ahead and trace over my 1, 2, 3 circles with my alcohol-based ink, aka Sharpie. Remember, totally okay to turn your paper. And see, I even made a little error there, but that's okay because art isn't perfect and that's beautiful. That's also part of why I erase my guidelines at the end, is so that you can't exactly see what I was going for unless I draw it with the alcohol-based ink and leave it at the end, because the creative process is a journey, and you just gotta go with the flow. Alright, so I have those 3 circle shapes filled in my personal design. Remember, you can do your design however you'd like. This is just my personal process. I'm going to go ahead and trace a couple of my guidelines. I'm not going to do all of them. I just think it would kind of add this element of like, I don't know, sectioned, and I think that it would have a cool pattern. So that's my personal reasoning behind adding these lines. I'm going to leave this line blank, so that way when I erase it, this center will be found here, and then when I erase the other guideline, the center will be found here. But in this last circle, I'm going to go ahead and connect that guideline for my pattern. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take my art gum eraser, like I already told you about at the beginning. Generally, I think it's good with the water-based ink, which is the Tombow brush pens, or I guess these other brand of brush pens. I don't even know. Spice Box. I have like 4 of them, so I'm not really sure where they came from, honestly. But anyway, the water-based Tombow brush pens, I usually wait about 2 minutes for, but Sharpie dries relatively instantly. So even though it's not been that long, I feel comfortable going over my already drawn lines with my art gum eraser. And even though I think that I can't see any graphite, I am still going to personally go over, oh, I do want to do one more mark actually. I like to make my center mark a little dot, so before I erase my X in the middle, I'm going to go ahead and do a little dot there so that I know where my center is. Anyway, what I was saying was, I go over my black lines personally with the art gum eraser because, as you guys saw when I traced out the black line, I did not trace my circle perfectly, and like I said before, that's okay, but if I leave that guideline there and somebody that looks at my finished art piece can see that that guideline's a little bit off than the line that I actually drew, then they would know that I didn't draw what I intended necessarily. And so by erasing over the ink lines that I've already created with that Sharpie, I'm going to go ahead and take any guidelines away, and I'm left with this base mandala shape. So I created this in front of you guys using 1 Sharpie, 1 eraser, a number 2 pencil, and a couple dinner plates. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is add some of these intricate details that are inspired by the Zentangle book. Now before I go ahead and start working this in, I did want to take a minute and show you guys. I often create pieces that go off the page, like that leading line idea, and I create just a section of a mandala. So if doing a centered, perfectly symmetrical, or trying to be perfectly symmetrical piece feels stressful to you, then maybe put your center on the corner of the page and create the illusion that you're only getting a small section of a bigger picture. So here is that. And then I also have 2 other canvas pieces which I've done a similar concept for. These are with paint, so mind you, it's a different medium, but the idea is that it is a mandala center that you only see maybe a quarter of or a section of the finished piece. And then I'll show you guys one more example and I'll get going to fill this in. So I have this one as well. Again, a corner center and stretched out off across the page. So again, this is one small section of a larger perceived finished piece because it creates the illusion that the center is actually here and that maybe the piece is the size of 4 canvases that are this size. But anyway, that was just, again, one example. So I'll get back to this illustrated mandala now that I've showed you guys a couple other variations. What I personally like to do is go through with circle shapes. So that's what I'm going to go in with right now. Oh, and I like to take a scrap piece of paper and rest my hand on it while I'm working so that I don't smear my art, because art is important. So I'm going to go ahead and make my little dot in the center kind of look like a flower. So I only added 4 circles for that one. I'm going to go ahead and keep layering that kind of simple design, but when you do a simple design over and over again, it becomes this larger, more complex thing together. I don't know how else to say it other than that. It just design or collective creation, you could say. Alright, so I have a couple layers of that circle shape. Now I'm going to look at my page here. I've got this really cool wave section as an example. But I really want to combine that wave section with the zigzag section. So I'm going to go ahead and create kind of a sun appearance. So I remember that I have my guideline here, so I can create kind of a line with my eye. It's not going to be perfect, but you know, and create a zigzag sun line. And I'm going to turn my page and duplicate the same zigzag sun line on the other side. Now with this specific design, I'm not really worried about the number of points being the same. Again, if I were selling this piece, then this would be, oops, closed my book on accident. If I were selling this piece, then I would be more concerned about being like perfectly symmetrical, but this is not with that intention. So I'm not worried about it being perfectly symmetrical, but I did want to give you guys the option that if you wanted to do the same number of points with your zigzag design, that can be a way to help make sure that your finished product looks a little bit more cohesive, you could say. Okay, so I've got that zigzag, but I want to go ahead and add the waves in too, because that contrast between the sharp edges and the curves is really important to me in this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and wave in the other sections. Okay, so now I have a base sectioned off shape for that center of my mandala. So I want to move out to this layer now, and I want to do something with this top shape and this bottom shape. So for inspiration, I'm going to go over here to my book. Let's see. I really like this square shape. So personally, I'm going to go in and add a couple squares. Again, I'm not worrying about it being super perfect because art is imperfect and that's what makes art beautiful. So as you're creating, try to be mindful and not so critical of yourself because, you know, your art's not going to be perfect and that's okay. Now, opposite of the square shape, I want to go ahead and add a circle. So I'm going to add a circle here. And I'm going to add a circle here. There we go. And then I have another perceived sectioned off area. Now the sections are actually this top and bottom piece, so it's different kind of outline sections than that first one. But I want them to be a little bit more clear. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue that zigzag line out. Again, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. I need to remind myself of this, so maybe you also need to be reminded of this as you're creating. Okay, so I have 1 section, 2 section, 3 section, 4 section, 5 section, 6 section, but I really want to divide this section up in half. So part of this is going to be recreating part of that guideline. And then honestly, guys, I'm going to erase this circle so that I can make it a little bit more centered, because yes, it's imperfect, but I don't want this one part being a little bit off center to affect that line also being off center. So there we go. Okay, now this, I want you guys to know really quick, is a very basic how to draw a mandala step-by-step class. I'm also planning to teach a mandala for stress relief, or a mandala drawing or painting for stress relief class in the very near future, and that specific class will go into the Jungian psychoanalysis, psychology connected with this specific style of art. This class, however, is going to be specifically focused on just how to create it step by step versus the psychology and healing modalities and research behind why art therapy is healing. So I just wanted to clarify that with you guys, that this is more of a step-by-step thing, and there is another class coming out that is very much connected to this that will go more into like the psychology behind why this particular style of artwork is very prominent in many cultures. So if you like this so far and are interested in kind of expanding your knowledge on other topics other than you know, how just to create this piece, then maybe consider taking that class in the future as well. I'm not 100% sure when honestly I will have that one finished, but it is in the works right now. Anyway, so I have my base design. I'm going to go ahead, before I even add to this last layer, I'm going to add my alcohol-based ink through Sharpie, and I'm going to go ahead and trace those lines. Now try to be mindful as you trace these lines, or as you trace your lines, I should say, with whatever marker you choose, that you can always go back in and adjust your graphite marks, but that ink and paint are, you know, relatively permanent. So if you want to make any adjustments with your design, it should generally be done with that graphite layer, so that you can easily erase any perceived mistakes that maybe you make. Nobody's perfect, you know. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and erase over those center marks that I've created. Again, when I use water-based ink, I want to give it a little bit of time, but since this is that almost instant drying Sharpie, I'm going to go ahead and just erase right on over it. Now with my experience personally, art gum erasers does not smear markers usually. I mean, it's going to depend on your climate, your markers, the brand of eraser you buy, a bunch of different factors, but in my experience with this kind of eraser, it typically does not smear. Okay, go ahead and, I don't know where my brush thing is. Oh, here it is. That off. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of line work in here. So I really wanted to add a leaf shape. Go ahead and do that. Now for a leaf shape, I'm just going to do, you know, a C shape facing another C shape and then kind of flatten it to a point. And then I'm going to do another leaf shape over here. I want to mirror that same design off of these guidelines, which I've created in that center circle. So I'm going to do that same type of pattern. And if you guys notice that I went outside of my line right there, I'm just going to go ahead and correct that. Just by adding a second little line. Little illustrator secret for you guys. Alright, so now I've got the leaf shape, I've got that circle and square shape, and then I've got the waves and the zigzags kind of sectioning off this piece as a whole. I'm going to go ahead and just erase a couple more little marks because I missed a couple spots. I don't know where my eraser is. There it is. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and go in with the water-based markers that I showed you guys at the beginning, those Tombow brush pens. Add that design in the center. Now since this center shape is just kind of like a cluster of circles, I'm not going to be too picky about, you know, coloring it in, quote unquote, in a really specific way. I'm honestly just going to make this whole section blue. So I'm going to go ahead and color over that. And the center of our mandala is blue. Then I'm going to go ahead and go in with this purple Tombow brush pen. And I want to make the outer ring of this mostly purple. I want to leave the leaves green. So again, I'm going to go in with my smear protector card here. Actually, I think I'm going to do every other section this purple color, so I'm going to leave this one blank. Go ahead and mark this purple, blank, mark that purple, blank, and mark that purple. So now I have my sections outlined that I need to go through and just color in. It's part of why moving your paper is helpful. You guys are like seeing it happen. And I got a little bit of purple inside of my leaf shape. So one really easy way for, not easy, but one way that I'm going to remedy this is by taking a cool toned green, which I mean green is cool tone in general, but I want to make sure that it's really dark green. So I'm going to take this Sharpie. That's not actually dark green that I want. I'm going to take this dark green, and then I'm going to make every other leaf this dark green, because this green color will help camouflage that little line of purple that I quote unquote messed up. But I mean, it's not really a mess up because it's art and you can't really mess up art. It's just part of the process. Anyway, so now I'm going to follow that pattern, and I'm going to do a dark green and a dark green here. So really, I guess making a mandala kind of feels like you're making your own coloring sheet, which sounds silly, but that's kind of what's happening. So this one, and I got this one for the dark green. Okay, so I've got that dark green kind of camouflaging that purple right there. And then I'm going to take the light green that I had set out already and fill in the other leaf shapes I've got going on. Now remember, we are mixing different kinds of ink here, so if you were to go over a water-based ink with another water-based ink, then it may kind of smear on your brush tip, so just be mindful of that. Again, I've learned that the hard way, so maybe learn from an artist / art teacher's mistake. And then you won't, you know, make that error, perceived error, I should say, on your own art. Because, again, you can't really make mistakes with art. It's part of the process, and it's all a big learning journey and adventure. So, I'm actually going to keep these two greens out so that I can, add them again within my piece. But I'm going to actually move back towards this blue. And I'm going to reincorporate, or I'm going to incorporate, I should say, this blue into these blank sections so that the center of my piece has a color connection with this outer layer of my mandala, so that the whole finished piece looks cohesive. I'm also personally choosing to create with cool tone colors as a whole. I'm probably going to add in some orange and some yellow in a little while, but so far I've added a bunch of cool tone colors. And again, I had that little line of blue, so I'm going to go ahead and go over that with a black ink when I'm all done with the blue layer. Again, you can use whatever colors, whatever art medium you want for your own mandala. This is just an example with some markers and a pencil. Ink and graphite are, you know, the fancy art school ways of saying that, but honestly, you guys probably have pencils and markers, or at least maybe a highlighter or something in your house already. So maybe just using the resources that you have made available to you to create with. I mean, a piece of computer paper would work just fine for this. I personally am just using a sketchbook because I like to organize my things and my artwork, and this makes it easier for me to personally organize it, but this process would not be any different if this was just a piece of computer paper. I guess I would personally tape down all 4 pages, or all 4 corners of the page, I should say, if I was using a piece of computer paper, and I would still use a piece of cardstock, but you can honestly just use like recycled cereal box or something similar. You don't need this board. I just had it, I think I got it from like a framing place from scrap or something when I was matting pieces in art school for a show. So honestly, maybe you could check out a framing place in your area. They generally have scraps left over, and if you ask, I mean, they're typically just throw them away, so they would often rather have them go to good use, and that is a really inexpensive or even free way to get that scrap. But obviously, if you wanted to recycle a cereal box or something similar, then that would do the same purpose. It would just have some words and like a design on there. So whichever works, there's no right or wrong way. Got my last section of blue to fill in here, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on to that middle layer of my mandala design. Remember to be careful and take your time. If that resonates with you, honestly, some mandalas that I create are really rushed and I don't show them to anyone. So, you know, just do whatever intuitively feels right or best for you as the creative, because you, at the end of the day, decide when your personal art piece is done, and that's just your personal decision as the creative. So think about your art piece as like a place where you can decide what it should look like, basically, and try not to be judgmental. So I'm going to go ahead and go in the center of this middle layer of my mandala. So the center is blue. It fans out with that kind of like zigzag wave shape, but I don't have anything in this ring here. So I'm going to go ahead and take that green highlighter. So it's not the exact same shade of green that I was using before, but it is also a cool tone color, so it will create a sense of cohesiveness throughout my entire piece. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in both of the circles and the squares. Now it's a really subtle difference, this highlighter color, in contrast with the other greens in here, but it is enough of a difference where when you look at the whole finished piece, you'll be able to tell that there's a few different shades of that same color represented. So I've got those green shapes filled in. I'm going to go ahead and move back to purple, but I want to switch to a darker purple. And I've got an indigo blue as well. And I'm going to add a pink. So for this middle layer here, I'm going to go ahead and do a pattern with that purple and that pink. Now for the pink, I've got big fine point permanent markers. I mean, honestly, this is just stuff I've collected over time and that like people have bought and given to me, and things that like, I don't know, I've just acquired many different kinds of markers and things, and so there's not really any specific reason why I chose this style of marker or anything. I just liked the color and it was already in my collection. So you personally should maybe, you know, just use what you have. You know, you don't need to go out and buy anything for this probably. I mean, most people have that that pencil and piece of computer paper. The tape is honestly optional. The plate is honestly optional. It's just things that I personally have found help me with my creative process, and so I want to pass them along to you. But if it doesn't resonate or work well for you, then leave it, because you should do what's best for you. So I'm going to go every other one with this color again. And then with the other sections, I want it to contrast this purple here. So I'm going to do this deep indigo. Now again, choose whatever colors personally resonate with you and that you feel drawn to and want to use. These are just, you know, some colors that I'm feeling drawn to. I usually gravitate towards cool tone colors. I really enjoy creating with purple and blues and greens, but that's just my personal style and preference. You should do your own personal style and preference with your own art piece. Because remember, each mandala is unique and different and beautiful, and honestly, it's your own. So just make it your own. And again, if there's minor imperfections, which are in every single art piece, then just accept that that's part of the process. And understand that us as humans, as creators, as creatives, are imperfect beings. And so just try not to be as critical of yourself as you personally work on your own mandala. Because when it's all done, likely you will like the holistic design that you've created. And you know what, if you don't like it, that's okay. You can rip it up and throw it away, and that's cool too, because sometimes destroying art after you create it can be really relaxing and cathartic. So I want you guys to keep in mind, as I am the individual that's just showing you this process and discussing these words with you, that my words are actually representations of conversations that I've had with artists and research that I've done and my personal experience creating this style of artwork, and also teaching classes similar to this on how to create similar styles of artwork. But just keep in mind that everyone's experience will impact their own creative process. And so if this does not resonate with you or speak true for you, then it's okay to leave it. But I did want you to understand that as a creative, as a creator in this context, this is really important, and this is a connection to many cultures, and it's a lot deeper than just a design on a paper. So if you personally feel compelled to do further research connected with that, I invite you to do that. It's been really helpful to me in my artistic process personally, and my growth as you know, just a human being. But you know, again, each person's process within their art is completely different, and also within their life. So again, do whatever resonates with you personally. So I finished that layer of pink in that section. I'm going to go ahead and go in with that indigo or violet shade and fill in those remaining sections. I also want to take a minute to thank Spectra Art Space for allowing me to facilitate this class with them. I really hope that you guys as viewers and as an audience appreciate this skill. I know that this is one that's personally changed my life, and so if this, you know, lesson or art making process has an impact on another person's life, then that would be really beautiful. And if not, then that's okay. I'm going to keep creating anyway. But it's just helped me, and so I thought it maybe would help you as well. And also, the gallery is amazing, which was really, I think, the original thought with that rant there. Was that, you know, thanks Spectra Art Space for even allowing me to do this and to share this with my community, and for providing you guys, you know, as art viewers and as an audience with content that you guys as fellow creatives, you know, value and appreciate during this kind of weird time in the world. So I have that second layer of this piece finished. Now I just have the sections that were created between the wavy and zigzag lines in that center part of the mandala. So I want to make sure to find my cap. Oh, here it is. I am notorious for leaving caps off my markers, so I'll be mindful to not do that, of course. So that was that moment there. But anyway, so right now in my piece I have pink, indigo, blue, green, and purple. I think it'd be cool if I added a little bit more purple, so I'm going to go ahead and take this purple highlighter, and I think I have a skinny purple marker. I do not. So I'm going to take this pink skinny purple marker, and I'm going to go ahead and just do line just connecting the outside of that blue. Now all the lines in my mandala personally do not need to be outlined in black. I just like to do that so that I have some guidelines, but again, that's just my personal process. I think half guidelines is helpful, and then you can sort of, or I rather am eyeballing you know, these estimate of like where I think the center of this section is, sort of thing. So I've got that pink outline. I'm gonna go ahead and color in that little shape that I created with that leading line with the pink in my design. Leading line is a term generally used with photography as well. But it can be used in any kind of art. But I think I mentioned this before, but it's basically just any line that leads your eye off or to another part of the page. So I use it a lot with my artwork because, I don't know, I think it looks cool, and I learned photography and logo design first in art school, and so that's kind of where my mind personally goes. But I've personally studied a bunch of different things, so my process with why I put line work where I put line work is influenced by these other kinds of art that I've studied, and so things that you've studied in your life will probably influence your life potentially in a positive way through your artwork. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take this purple, this is a purple highlighter, let me make sure it's the right shade that I'm going for. And I'm going to go ahead and do those on the sections that are opposite of my pink design on the second layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and layer that. And then again, I'm going to go in with every other section and create that purple. I like doing every other in art. I like doing every three. I found in my artwork and art classes and research that the eye and the mind typically like odd numbers, so I like to use 1s, 3s, and 5s. But again, everyone's process is different. Asymmetrical things, in my experience, tend to be a little bit more interesting to look at, though. So, a little unpredictability. Which is maybe part of why I like mandalas, is because they're like consistent and maybe a little more predictable than the other kinds of art that I like to make. Again, though, everyone has their own process. And I'm coloring outside the lines a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go in with, I think I'm going to do orange for this last section. I like to incorporate orange into my pieces. It's one of my favorite colors, and there's none in this so far, so these spots are screaming for some orange. So I'm going to go ahead and section that in. Again, this is just, it's been rubbed off, but I think it's Sharpie brand. It's just a highlighter. Honestly, any color would have worked beautifully for this because they're all just working in one connected, beautiful design. Now for my finishing touches, typically what I do, and this is from another artist, so I'm going to name drop her. She's a Spectra artist as well. Her name is Grace Noel. She taught me that some of the most beautiful finishing touches are adding a little bit of metallic, because it adds a sense of highlight and three-dimensionality that really makes that element of your piece kind of pop off the page. That sparkle, but you don't have to like actually put glitter on your piece. You can just use a marker or watercolor. So today I'm going to use some metallic Sharpies, or tonight, because it's actually night where I am right now. Tonight I'm going to use some metallic Sharpies as my finishing touches, but I want to fill in my whole page, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in this section and this section really quick. I want to add some yellow to my piece, so I'm going to go ahead and, for a sense of balance, add yellow here and add yellow here. And again, if you end up accidentally layering, like I have, over some of that water-based ink and carrying it onto the page, that's okay. But just be mindful that that can and will happen. And again, I have learned that personally the hard way. I think